With StraightSmile Solutions, StraightSmileSolutions.com, and today we're going to talk about fixing posterior crossbites in adults, specifically in adults with Invisalign. Can you do it? Should you do it? Should you even try it? What happens if you try it? What can you expect? What should you tell the patients? What are some scenarios where it might work? What are some scenarios where it might not work? And what are some scenarios that you shouldn't even attempt? So this is a really, really tough question. And unfortunately, so keep in mind with Invisalign, the default is going to be don't fix posterior crossbites. That is in your clinical preferences. Now, some people have undefaulted that, but that should be your default unless you've changed that. So your posterior crossbite shouldn't come fixed. However, if you've overridden the preferences or you have things in the comment section, you might find that indeed they try to fix it, or you might tell them to fix it. Now, even if it's not technically possible, if you tell them to try to fix it, they will try to fix it. That doesn't mean it's possible, healthy, probable. It doesn't mean that it's even going to happen. So I see this so often, and I kind of wish that Invisalign would, sometimes they'll put like the dots over it, like the blue dots or the black dots. Sometimes they'll leave a little note in there saying, hey, this may not be possible. Most of the time they don't do any of the above. So you don't really know. I wish they'd almost give it a score, like probability of this happening successfully. That's one of my pet peeves with Invisalign, and I love that they listen to my videos because it is a big problem. You know, like if y'all know that your algorithm says this is probably not going to happen, let the doctors know, especially the less experienced doctors, because they really get themselves in a lot of trouble with telling a patient, well, hey, the ClinCheck says it's possible, so it must be possible. Well, they don't realize what other side effects can happen when you attempt something that really isn't possible. So let's talk about the side effects first of all. And that doesn't mean you're always going to get the side effects. And to be really honest, as an orthodontist, I don't always even know if the side effects are going to happen. I'm going to tell the patient, and these are lightly covered in your informed consent. But if you know you're doing something a bit edgy and a bit fringy, you know, that may or may not be possible, you really, as orthodontists, we tell the patients if they really want something done and we think it's less than likely, we're going to say, hey, look, we'll do this for you, or maybe we won't. I have to think about the risk, benefits, and alternatives. I have to explain the risk, benefits, and alternatives to the patient, all the risks. If you don't know what they are, you have no business doing this, you know? So I'm going to write them down specifically. The patient is going to get them explained. They're going to be written down. The patient's going to sign that they understand the risk. And if the patient really wants to try and they understand the risk, in my mind, the benefits have to outweigh the risks. Now, for me, fixing a posterior crossbite, almost never do the benefits outweigh the risks. It just doesn't. Why? What's the risk? Lots of things. You can kill the tooth. You can push the tooth through the buccal plate. You can kill the nerve. You could put the tooth in a position that's unhealthy so that the forces are not loaded properly in the future, and then you're going to kill the tooth later. You're going to get perio problems later. You have fractions later. So many things can happen. So just because the ClinCheck, this is what I'm trying to hit home. Just because the ClinCheck says it's possible doesn't mean it's possible. It doesn't mean it's healthy. You need to know what you're doing. So my suggestion for general dentists is don't do it. Don't do it. But let's talk about some situations where it might be possible and ways that you can maybe do some workarounds to make it improved, but maybe not perfect, and things you can look for. So I have a couple scenarios here, and these aren't the perfect scenarios because I had patient images that I didn't have permissions to share. So I'm using stock images and what I can get. So first thing to keep in mind is CRCO shifts. And I have a really great video on CRCO shifts. If you want to go into my channel, I have over 3,000 videos in my channel alone. You go to the little magnifying glass, put in CR-CO, or just even put in the letter CR and it should pop up. If you can't find it, you can email me info@straightsmilesolutions.com or contact me at straightsmilesolutions.com. Say, hey, I want the CRCO shift video. I will send it to you. No problem. It's free of charge. I know where all my stuff is and I'm happy to give it to you. So anytime I see a unilateral crossbite, say like in scenario 1, where the midlines are off, first thing I'm thinking is CRCO shift. Okay? And sometimes it's a shift from right to left. Sometimes it's a transverse shift. Sometimes it's an anterior posterior shift. Sometimes it's transverse and anterior posterior. So it can be in many different planes of space. So for example, in this situation, I saw this patient walk in my office. First thing I'm thinking is, ooh, this patient has a major CRCO shift. I'm going to try I think we're missing a lateral too, which makes sense. But I'm going to try to line this up, get the midlines lined up, just even if it's an unstable bite, just to kind of see how the bite looks after I do that, because that's probably what the bite is, and they're probably just shifting into a more comfortable position. Maybe they're not. Maybe I can't guide the lower jaw back, but probably I can. So again, first thing I looked at anytime I see a unilateral crossbite is to see if the midlines are on, okay? So keep that in mind. It may not be as bad as you think. Once you line up the midlines and you put it where it was supposed to be before the shift, if it's just a tiny bit of expansion, and the things I'm looking at is the bone. So if I draw a line here, see here's where the buccal bone is, and here's where the buccal bone is down here. The buccal bone on top is supposed to be wider than the buccal bone on the bottom. Well, here it's more in, right? It's more palatal. So that's not what we want. But then again, I don't think this is the bite anyways, so it's probably. So see how the buccal bone is here? It's out here, and the bone down here on the mandible is more in. That's what I want to see. So if your bone is like, you got to put the teeth over the bone, right? Maybe I can angle it a little bit out, but we don't want to blow it out the bone, because then there's no bone to put it in. The roots are going to be outside the bone. Your tooth's going to die. You're going to get perio. You're going to get endo. You're going to get all kind of problems. And guess who's going to be responsible? It's going to be you. And if you, as the dentist, didn't explain the risk to the patient and you killed the tooth, you could potentially be liable. And I don't care if you have an informed consent done, okay? You would have to. And so again, are the risks less than the benefits, more than the benefits? You are the dentist. You should know these things, okay? Okay, let's talk about scenario 2. Scenario 2, we definitely have a crossbite here. You can't really see the bone. Sorry, my number 2 is, but definitely the bone is more in. Midlines are on here, okay? So in this situation, I believe this bite, okay? Bone's about the same here, but again, the upper bone should be wider than the lower bone, so I don't think I would fix this crossbite here. In this case, midlines are on, bone is wider down here. I might fix it maybe canine first premolar, maybe canine first premolar, second premolar. I'm going to leave the molars, okay? I'm going to leave what I can. That means what would I have to do? Well, we have some spaces down here, but I might have to extract a lower incisor, or I might have to do a ton of IPR on the bottom to tuck these in. And again, you're lining the teeth up in an unfavorable way. So again, this is a gamble. There's a small risk. You have to let the patient know, but at least it's looking better in this zone. And I'll leave the molars and crossbite. What else? Number 3, this is a kid, I believe. Yes, it is a kid. So I believe maybe we're not a kid. No, I don't think we are. I think these are permanent teeth. So this is not my patient. So in this case, I'm not really looking at it from straight on. I like to see the straight on look to see where the bone is. If it's a kid or a teenager, of course I'm going to do an expander, right? Of course I'm going to do an expander. That makes life way easier. Don't even stress about it. But if it's an adult, again, we might leave the crossbite on the molar. We might fix the crossbite on the premolars. Well, we don't really have one here. So you'd have to really look at the bone and see if it's possible. Usually it's possible to fix it on the premolars. But again, you're putting the tooth in a slightly unfavorable position. This is a kid, yes. So in this case, of course, you do an RPE here first, or a Schwartz, expand them out, and then you're going to go ahead and finish up in your braces or Invisalign. Never, when you see a kid, and by kids, of course, you have to know something about the skeletal maturity age of the patient. Remember, in girls, they could go through maturity at 8, 9, 10. You get some wiggle room on expansion, but you don't get indefinite wiggle room on expansion. Boys, of course, you have a lot more wiggle room. Usually I'm thinking 14, 15, maybe even 16, maybe even 17 if I'm doing slow expansion. I can do a little bit more and get away with it. Keep a close eye on it. I'm going to expand them first. Why would I want to tip teeth when I can bodily expand, opening up the palate, improving the airway, and getting a more stable outcome and healthier position for the teeth for time to come, right? So a lot of times, and that's another little bone I have to pick with Invisalign, they will never tell you that. They won't say, hey, maybe you should expand first, because they can't dictate treatment. They're not the doctors. They have doctors on their team, and they're more than glad. Sometimes they're more than glad to meet with you, if you do the Invisalign Pro, but rarely do they. I feel like the Invisalign Pro, I feel like it's very leaning on towards selling the cases, that's their business, right? They're not going to tell you, oh, you should do an expander first. They're just not. So, because then they're not going to get that case, right? You might forget, you might not do it later. They're not going to sell the case. So I've done some cases and I've heard of some cases people have done with Invisalign Pro where it's like, come on, obviously. I mean, you're orthodontist for Invisalign Pro and you're not saying something that's just right and totally obvious. I know you know this, but that's their job, right? I can't tell them not to do their job. So again, this goes into a whole nother discussion about taking aligner courses from an aligner company. Bad move. Always a bad move. And I don't even do aligner courses because I don't think you should be taking an aligner course until you understand the basics of braces and phase 1. You should do some cases. If you want to learn a lot about aligners, you should do it the way orthodontists do. Do we sit and take a bunch of classes? No, we do not. We start seeing cases from day 1. We're already dentists. We're going to see that case. I have some faculty members that are going to help us out. They're going to help us work it up. We're probably not going to take super hard cases, but actually that's not true because you take whatever walks in. The first year ortho residents get all the cases, and there might be surgical cases, they might be exposure cases, they might be crazy easy class 1 cases. You get what you get. Of course, in residency, we try to balance things out just like you do in dental school where you try, and different residencies do things differently. At least at mine, there was no quota or anything like that. You know, like some people had tons of surgical cases, some people had tons of exposure cases, some people had tons of class 3 cases. It was whatever walked in and who was accepting patients that day. And, you know, some days we took new patients and they tried to balance it out, but, you know, the front desk never knew who was what, you know, because you hadn't examined them yet. And sometimes we try to trade around, you know, if we knew somebody needed more experience with something. Hey, so-and-so's going to work on you. But ultimately it was just a matter of luck of the draw. And we ended up, you know, maybe starting, 100, 200 cases. I mean, a lot. Definitely we took cases our first year and maybe the first half of our second year, and we didn't our third year. Our third year was all about finishing up the cases. But yeah, I'm going off on a tangent, but I'm letting you know, no sense in taking an aligner class. You're learning absolutely, everyone I know that's taken an aligner class has not, I'm not impressed with what they know. Matter of fact, I feel like their brains are ruined in terms of what they know because they're so they're filled with junk. Their brains are filled with junk, not understanding exactly how teeth move. They just understand that aligner system. It's very biased. So, oh goodness, what happened there? So anyways, I'm just going to give my story. And again, I don't offer an aligner class, so I'm not saying this because I think there's no point to an aligner class. I offer all my content for free. I make it for free. It costs me money to make it. I post it. I eat the cost. I don't sell it. It's free. It's on YouTube. It's on my webinar page, which is gpwebinar.com. If you want to know something, I've got playlists. You can learn everything you need to know just from my YouTube channel. That's it. That's all you need to know. And if you want to start working on cases, you will learn so much. And I'm not the only ortho consultant that's out there. There's a lot of orthodontists that do consulting. Find the right person for you. There's tons of us that are doing it. Some of us do it full-time. Some of us do it on the side, you know, in addition to their practice. Obviously, you're going to want to find somebody whose personality matches with you. You find that they're ultra responsive, they're very responsible, that they're giving you good outcomes, that they're attending to your needs and the needs of your team. Of course, anyone that works for an aligner company, I think you shouldn't hire, but that's just my opinion because they're going to be super biased. You know, if you work with me, if I think it's a case that shouldn't be with Invisalign, I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to say, do braces. Or if I think you need to do an RPE first, I'm going to tell you, don't do the Invisalign. Start with an RPE because that's how we do things in an ortho clinic. We do what is right, and that's ultimately what's in the best interest of the patient. You want to be unbiased when you look at these cases. You don't want to come in and think in my head, I only offer Invisalign. That's all I offer, because that's a mistake, because it's not always the best thing for the patient. You know, so if you're going to offer ortho as a GP, you need to be willing to offer all kinds of ortho. Now, of course, if you really only want to offer Invisalign, then if it's not a good case for Invisalign, then refer them to somebody who does braces. That's the main thing. Or, you know, refer them to somebody that does interceptive or expanders. But anyways, hopefully this was helpful. Again, be careful committing to fixing a posterior crossbite in Invisalign. Think about the box. Think, you know, open the box up. Think about outside the box. And think of the best way to save the patient's teeth. Nobody died from a posterior crossbite. As a matter of fact, most times nobody even notices. So, especially if you just leave it on the molars. All right, thanks so much.